Welcome back. Apple's mega launch is part of the tech giant's strategy to amplify its presence in India. So what impact will this have going forward? To discuss that and more, I'm now joined by Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO at US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, and Daniel Ives, Managing Director at the Equity Research Division at Wedbush Securities. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Dan, if I can begin with you. The India launch and Tim Cook's India visit is something you've been watching very closely. When it comes to Apple's global revenue strategy, their global growth strategy, how important is the launch of these two retail stores and Tim Cook's India visit?
I mean, look, today India is 1.5% of Apple's revenue. So when you look at the opportunity, we think that's something that could be 8 to 10% in the next, call it 3 to 4 years. It's significant. I mean, just given what we see in terms of, middle class more and more wanting iPhones, we continue to see this as really a huge opportunity. Of course, from a production perspective, they're betting on India. But retail, this is really them diving into the deep end of the pool. We think we could be looking about 20 billion of sales by 2025 coming out of India as a growth catalyst.
That's an important point. Mr. Aghi, what do you think Tim Cook's pitch to India is going to be? We have been seeing stories about $5 billion worth of exports, $7 billion worth of manufacturing in India. What's Tim Cook's pitch to Ashwini Vaishnav, the electronics and IT minister, going to be, to the Prime Minister?
Well, Parikshit, a couple of messaging. Number one is it sends a message to US and European company that Apple, which makes one of the most complicated devices, one of the most efficient in supply chain, is able to manufacture in India. That means you can come in and manufacture, especially in the boardroom level, but looking at China plus one strategy. It sends a very strong message to other companies to look at India much more seriously, because if Apple can make money here, so can you itself. So that's message number one. Second is I think it's important to understand as we streamline global supply chain, it is important, the messaging to the Prime Minister and to the Minister is that bring in more efficiency, because India provides that opportunity to multinational companies, be it from the United States, be it from Europe, to come in and manufacture and become a alternative to China itself. So the message from Tim Cook to the Prime Minister is keep on driving the agenda you're driving, keep on driving the efficiency you're driving, keep on becoming globally competitive from a tax perspective. So that's the message I think he's going to convey to the Prime Minister.
Right. Dan, coming back to you, when it comes to supply chains, you have said in the past in 2022 how COVID-19 disruptions in China were like a punch in the gut for Apple. How important is for Apple to deepen manufacturing value chains in India and diversify away from China?
Look, I mean, the hearts and lungs of the Apple story are in China, both from a demand perspective and from a production. I think what we saw in December, that black eye coming out of China with the COVID lockdowns, this was really the straw that broke the camel's back for them to diversify from a production perspective, India, Vietnam, front and center. And I think it speaks to, Apple cannot have that happen again, and which is why Foxconn, Apple are betting on India, but also it's skin in the game. And I think as other guys talking about, it's really taking a page out of the China playbook in terms of their massive success there. Production, demand, start, and ultimately from a marketing blitz and everything else. And they could gain significant share versus Chinese low-cost competitors as well as Samsung.
Right. Mr. Aghi, when it comes to moving away from China, how will this process pan out? Yes, they are deepening manufacturing. Right now, they're not assembling the most high-end Apple products. They're not assembling iPads in India. And also, they're only assembling in India. They're not manufacturing in India so far. So what will it take for Apple to start doing that in India?
Well, I think the market is going to demand that you start manufacturing more and more in India, because India will become more and more efficient. You have to understand It will take 5 to 10 years to build that ecosystem. You got to have local chip manufacturing. You got to have a local case manufacturing. So, but I strongly believe that you will see that process moving forward. As of now, Apple has exported roughly $7 billion worth of goods which have been assembled in India. And the objective is by 2024, it is going to basically manufacture roughly 20 million iPhones in India, moving on to other devices itself. So I think trying to build the ecosystem is going to be the critical next step. That's where the Prime Minister and the Minister has to step in and say, tell us what else we need to do to encourage that ecosystem, what kind of PLI schemes we have to build to make sure these companies come in, are profitable in India itself. So we see this as a second and third and fourth step as Apple moves into India further and further.
Right. Daniel, if I can come to you, just a few months back, you had said that tech is the enemy number one on Wall Street and Apple has a bullseye on its back with fears of softening demand into 2023. Give us a sense of the challenges for Apple and how would they like to leverage its manufacturing base in India to overcome some of those challenges?
Look, I mean, Apple, if you look at last year, okay, not just from a demand perspective, but especially supply chain, I mean, that was the gut punch that we saw, especially in the holiday quarter, which is so important for them. Look, I think right now, I mean, the New York City cab driver is bearish on tech stocks, as well as, you know, and obviously Apple, you know, with the bullseye on their back. But yet they've been rocking Gibraltar, how they've been holding up, because they have something no other, you know, tech company or even company in the world has. It's that golden install base, 2 billion iOS devices. You look at India, it just expands that opportunity, but from a production perspective, making sure they don't get hit by lightning twice in terms of what happened a year ago, and especially in the December quarter. And I think that ultimately speaks to why right now Cook is in India.
Right. Dan, also, has Apple ever given any sort of outlook on how they would like to increase their manufacturing footprint in India when it comes to moving supply chains away? The US industry has also been divided, that you cannot really cut off China from the supply chain and the process could take 10 to 15 years. Has Apple ever given any kind of indication to investors and analysts on how it would like to slow down reliance on China and how important India is in that strategy?
I mean, look, this is all a game of high-stakes poker, so they got to keep their playbook close to the chest. Look, China is going to continue to be the epicenter of Apple, and that's not changing anytime soon. But I believe India, you know, that's been a tough nut to crack for Apple over the years, but now they've started to see more success, and this is really them doubling down on the India strategy. And I would expect in this upcoming conference call on May 4th, for Cook to talk more about India as an opportunity. I think this is really going to be sort of the first time they're going to, you know, dive deeper into that strategy.
Right. Mr. Aghi, coming back to you, among some of the demands from Apple, and this is not just Apple, this is the mobile phone industry demand in India, is to reduce the basic customs duty to a flat rate of maybe about 15% from the 22% currently on high-end phones, further reduce import duties on certain components which we are getting from China and other markets. How critical is this for Apple to grow its manufacturing footprint in India? Do you think those concessions should be seriously considered? Has USISPF as an industry chamber also been sending those demands to the government?
Well, it's a balancing act. You want to be able to encourage companies to manufacture in India. That means maintain slightly higher duties. And when you manufacture in India, they become much more cost effective in your supply chain. At the same time, when you go through a transition period from assembly to manufacturing, you have to find a balance where you can bring in components which are globally competitive. So I think the balancing act has to be done by the finance ministry in conversation with the manufacturer of smartphones in India. And I believe the intent and the objective is the same. You know, how do you make India a manufacturing base? How do you create high-end job creation in India? And I think what we have seen so far in the last few years, the success of Apple moving fast enough from 0 to 1.4 million phones a month manufacturing is a truly, a success story which we need to applaud both Apple and the government of India to find a common solution. So to answer your question, I think we'll have to find a balancing act on import duties while manufacturing in India itself.
Right. As of now, Dan, we also see the Indian government rolling out production-linked incentives for Apple's contract manufacturers in India. There is also a concern and view in the Indian government, and which will possibly be expressed in talks with Tim Cook, is what is your view, what is your roadmap for India once this incentive gets over in the next 4 to 5 years? These incentives that you get every few months, if they get over, will you still remain as committed to the India market? What do you think about their long-term commitment, and what are the factors that will determine Apple's long-term commitment to the India market?
Look, I think Apple is not the most valuable company in the world by accident. Like, in other words, they play poker, and they need to make sure that the Indian government plays ball, that ultimately that they, from an infrastructure perspective, from a component, from a supplier perspective, that they build it out, logistics, other issues that we've seen in India, that those get resolved. Because then ultimately Apple, that really determines how much they're going to bet on India going forward. So I do think a lot of this sort of does rest on the government in terms of different incentives to build out distribution, logistics, supply chain, everything else. Because ultimately when Apple talks, everyone else listens. You're talking about the most powerful company in the world now betting on India, but they're going to kind of do this step by step, to sort of see, ultimately how the government of India builds this out. And I think that's why the meeting today is so important in going forward.
Right. Daniel Ives, Mr. Mukesh Aghi, thank you so much for joining us here on News Center, giving us your view on the launch of Apple's retail stores in India and Tim Cook's India visit as well. Thanks once again for being with us. Now, there's usually a high amount of brand loyalty towards Apple products. One person was seen carrying a vintage Apple computer, which he said he bought in 1984. Another person said he had not unboxed his iPod since 2005 and was looking to get Cook's autograph. My colleague Zina Baria caught up with these lifelong Apple loyalists.
The day of the awaited launch of Apple's flagship store has finally arrived. The fans have lined up to take a sneak peek of their favorite gadgets. Let's take a look at what they have to say and their excitement to the launch. As you can see, the Apple store has finally opened to one and all, and we have some Apple fans in the store here. Say hi. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, what do you wish to be when you grow up?
When I grow up, I want to buy the Apple company.
You are by the Apple company?
Yes.
Okay, and how do you like the launch today?
I liked it so much.
You really did? Did you get a picture with Tim Cook?
Yes.
Show me. Genius Bar, what do you have to say on that?
See, as they say, it's genius bar. So, I mean, no matter what problems you're facing with, whatever products, be it hard, like normally you won't face any problems, but if in case you have any issues with hardware or software, I think this is the place wherein you can get your problem resolved in like minutes.
I'm holding this 10 years old iPod. It was manufactured by Apple in September 2013.
Okay.
So it's almost 10 years old. And I bought it just to kind of for the keepsake for it. I haven't really unboxed it till about this morning. I really want to get this signed by Tim Cook if I can. But yeah, I mean, it's there. And the entire iPod lineup is now discontinued. So yeah, very happy to have this.
We have another Apple fan here, and he has his Macintosh here. Let's see what he has to say about it.
This is the OG, the original Apple Macintosh SE from 1984. And I've been using Apple since 1984. So it's been a long journey, but I'm really happy and proud that Apple is opening their first store in India. It's a proud moment for all the Apple fans out here in India. So yeah, big cheers to Apple for coming to India. Yeah.
The Apple store that has finally launched in Mumbai now. How do you feel, and have you picked up any products?
So I really feel that the Apple Store launch in India, Mumbai BKC, the first Apple Store, which launched after like 25 years in India, it is really great. It is a big gift by Apple this year to Mumbai and to the people of India basically.
Fantastic. I was the 5th person to enter this, and Tim Cook had personally hugged me and gave me a selfie too. So it was a great experience for me. It made my day. Well, thank you.
How about you?
I've been waiting for this day since years, so you can imagine how overwhelming the feelings are. I mean, it's the first Apple Store in India. That's too good.
And with that, it's a wrap on this special show. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.